We are headed to America's National Churchill Museum in Fulton, Missouri.
Winston Churchill came to the United States. He was out of politics at the moment and came here with President Truman to give what became known as his famous Iron Curtain speech.
The museum at Westminster College in Fulton is located about 8 miles south of the I-70 interstate between Columbia and St. Louis, Missouri. It costs a nominal fee and is an excellent museum for Churchill aficionados. When we arrived, there was a special exhibit of paintings by Churchill and an exhibit on Blenheim Palace, which is where Churchill was born. We also ran into a tour being given to the Lieutenant Governor of Missouri on the right by the museum curator at left.
If you look at Mr. Churchill's Iron Curtain speech, you see basically the foundation, right? A blueprint for what the Cold War would become. Later on, here in Westminster's long history, we would have Mikhail Gorbachev, president of the Soviet Union, arrive, and he would also give a speech declaring the Cold War over. He was filling in for the John Fidley Green Lecture Series. This is the lecture series that Churchill himself filled when he came here on March the 5th, 1946. And so that legacy has continued here at Westminster College. So why do we have a museum to Winston Churchill here in Fulton? Because he came here and he gave the John Fidley Green Lecture Series, where he famously said, "From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent." But the second question we always get too was, well, why Fulton? Why Westminster? It's okay to accept the fact that he came here, but why choose this location? Well, the location he did not choose, the location chose him. We actually decided that we would send him an invitation ourselves, right? Now, we knew this was kind of a shot in the dark, but we had kind of a secret weapon in our back pocket, Major General Harry Vaughan. Major General Harry Vaughan is actually a Westminster alumni, and so he came here, chatted with President Davidson of Westminster College, who was frivolously writing this invitation, right? Never quite getting it right. And then he finally passes the finished product on to Harry Vaughan. Harry Vaughan takes this to his boss in the White House, President Harry S. Truman, slaps it down on the desk in the Oval Office. Now, Truman, we have to remember, is from Missouri. So he's looking for any reason at this time to kind of take Missouri and lift it into the political spotlight. And so he picks up his own pen and he signs these wonderful words. "This is a wonderful school in my home state. I hope you can do it. I will introduce you." And so Churchill, who at this time, we have to remember, no longer the British Prime Minister, right? And he's actually in Miami, Florida on vacation painting. He hasn't been in front of cameras in quite some time. And so this is the perfect avenue where he can stand in front of cameras and a crowd once again, and he can give a very, very famous speech that outlines all of these things he's seeing in the East. So that is why Westminster College was chosen. But the final question we always get is, well, why are you in the basement of a church? Right? What is the deal with the church? And so this church is not native to these lands, right? She actually comes from the city of London. She originates on the corner of Aldermanbury and Love Lane, hence her name, St. Mary the Virgin Aldermanbury. Now, she first enters the historical record in 1181. This is the fancy historian's way of saying we have no records of when she was built, but this is the first time we have a record of her standing. So 1181 is the magic date. She survives all the way up until 1666. This, of course, marks the Great Fire of London, where sadly she would lose her lease on life, being burnt to a crisp. But the royal architect Sir Christopher Wren is then commissioned by the British Crown to rebuild 53 churches all over the city in response to that devastating fire. And so Christopher Wren would famously construct all of these churches while simultaneously laying the groundwork for his masterpiece, St. Paul's Cathedral. And so St. Mary gets a new lease on life, all the way up until December of 1940. When unfortunately she would take the direct impact of a German firebomb in the Blitz, and she would burn down again, this time resting as a ruin for 20 long years until Westminster College reaches out to the British government in the hopes of purchasing the building. We have to remember that after the Second World War, the Marshall Plan goes into full effect. The United States is leading the effort to rebuild much of Europe, and this goes to show you how broke the European powers really were. There were monuments in London that could be rebuilt, but, not enough funds to rebuild them all. And so St. Mary at this time is slated for demolition. This is when Westminster steps in and rescues the building. After purchase, we split her down into 7,000 separate stones, marking and numbering each stone in its spot on the building, until finally they would arrive here in 1965. So from 1965 to 1969, this building would go up, and the stones did not stay in the order that we wished. None of them. And so we had a long, long process of putting the building back together. The Fulton Sun, the local newspaper, called it, quote, the largest jigsaw puzzle in Missouri state history. And I'm inclined to believe them.
Yeah, right.
Thanks so much for watching.